be my guest, be my guest, be my guest with Sean Boy Joe.
Tots TV. I'm a tot.
Je suis une tot TV.
Tom
And tiny.
with the tots on Tots TV. 1, 2, 3, go. Rosie and Jim, Rosie and Jim, finding music every day. Rosie and Jim, and Milky sings the song. Hey, pop.
Welcome back to the Be My Guest podcast channel, my dear friends. With me, your boy, Sean Boy Joe, back for another podcast. And my guest today has worked in children's TV for more than 35 years as an actor, writer, producer, puppeteer and director. From Tom in Tots TV to Jim in Rosie and Jim. And who could forget Bob in Pop's programme? Some may call him a noodle brain, others a big banana, but I think he's nothing less than a Ragdoll legend. It's children's TV royalty, everybody. Robin Stevens, be my guest. Did you like that introduction there?
That's quite an introduction.
It is, and it's the only jokes you're going to get from me. That's the only jokes I can tell. You're nothing shorter than a big banana. There we go. So, Robin, it's wonderful to finally be chatting to you. This has been a long time coming. We tried this last year. We're doing it again now. Celebrating, of course, 30 years of Tots TV, which we'll come on to in due course. But like I do with all of my guests, take me back to the very beginning, a little Robin Stevens. How did you start out in all of this crazy world of kids' telly?
Well, I think 6 years old is probably the place to start.
As
Sean.
young as that?
I remember very well my parents and my two older brothers giving me a puppet show for my 6th birthday party, and I just remember the magic of that, and that kind of captured my imagination. And after that, I think I became a puppeteer, and I used to do my own shows for children, my own age. And later on, my dad helped me build a marionette theatre, and I used to do shows, at 12, maybe even 13. Did marionette shows, and so I was always a puppeteer basically, and I just never stopped.
So it was way back from the age of 6 that you knew you wanted to do this kids telly lark and get away with it.
Yeah, I remember lying on my bed as a child, just kind of dancing my hands around, thinking one day I'm going to do this on TV. And I had the idea when I got older that I kind of wanted to be an actor, but then I thought, actually, what I really want to do is use visual metaphors, I call them puppets. I want to use puppets as a way of communicating positive ideas to children, because children are the beginning of the next cycle of humans, and it's a good time to introduce positive ideas. And so that's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to use puppetry to introduce positive ideas to kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Did you come from that kind of entertainment background?
Not really, no. My dad was a lawyer, a solicitor, and my mum was a housewife pretty much. She had a degree in chicken farming. But no, not really. I was the kid at school that got chosen for the main parts in the school plays, and so I thought I was a bit of an actor until of course you meet all the other people from all the other schools that thought they were actors, and then you realise. And my dad gave me some good advice, and when I was trying to decide whether to be an actor or a puppeteer, he said, well, there's way less puppeteers, so you could be a fairly good puppeteer and still earn a living, whereas being an actor, there's way more competition. But it was more that I just wanted to go out and do something positive in the world. That was my main driving force. But everyone thought I was mad, of course. like, how are you going to earn a living being a puppeteer? And I left school at 18, and I wrote to all the big puppet theatres in England. There were some in those days. There are no really big ones anymore.
No.
And one of them wrote back and said, yeah, well, we can't offer you anything, but you could come and hang around. So I hung around Cannon Hill Puppet Theatre in Birmingham for a year as being a follow spot operator and the person who punches the kids' tickets. But it was a great training being in the audience for a year, just watching the shows, because I could see all the things that really worked for the kids in the audience, but I could also see everything that they weren't interested in, and which was quite useful later on.
Yeah, and I guess it was good training for you because you got to see what the actual actors and puppeteers were doing on stage. You could watch them at their craft.
Yeah, and then sadly my dad died, and he had been supporting me for that 1 year, and I was going to become a ranked Xerox clerk. I was ready to start, I think, the next day, and I got a phone call from Cannon Hill saying, actually, we're going to offer you a job as an acting ASM, acting stage manager, and so that's how I actually started my professional career. John Blundell was my mentor, and for 4 years I had an apprenticeship type training where he taught me how to carve puppets, how to perform, how to do every aspect of puppeteering. I recommend it, if you ever get a chance to have an apprenticeship, I recommend that way of learning something. I mean, colleges are great, but having an apprenticeship in a working environment is valuable. I mean, I wasn't, no one really took the time to really show me anything, but I was in that environment where you just have to learn quick because you're actually doing it, and you're going to open a show the next day.
Yeah,
so
certainly.
There's no room for not getting it right. So
Certainly,
you learn quick.
Yeah, certainly. So as well as having the love for puppeteering, it's making the actual models themselves that really engaged you.
Yeah, like I say, I've always mostly been interested in how I can communicate ideas with children. So I don't really mind if it's a puppet or a book or whatever it is. Yeah. But as to be a puppeteer, if you're going to be a puppeteer, you either have to pay a lot of money to get someone else to make your puppet, or you learn how to do it yourself. So I learned how to carve, I learned how to sew the costumes. That's part of being a puppeteer. And I actually love carving wood. I've just built a nice little art studio out in my back garden there, so I can start to carve again.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So talk to us then, moving down the line, what was the big break for you in terms of getting on to television?
Well, John Blundell, my mentor, also taught a puppeteer called David Claridge, who, I don't know if any of you still remember, but there was this character called Roland Rat on TVA, and they called him the rat that saved the sinking TV company. And his producer was called Anne Wood, and he introduced Roland Rat, David Claridge introduced me and John Blundell, my mentor, to Anne Wood. And John and my mentor was talking to Anne Wood about doing a show, which turned out to be Bob. And I think I was going to be John's assistant originally, but then I ended up actually being the main puppeteer. I remember being left with this wooden puppet in the corridor one day thinking, how on earth are you going to make this into a television character? Because most television characters look like Kermit or someone. They don't look like a wooden spoon, so it was a little shocking to me, but then this kind of character just arrived one day when I was performing with him, and he kind of took over, and I wasn't really in control of Bob. He just kind of did what he wanted to do. But there was this amazing director called Doug Wilcox, and he was in my ear, and together, he would suggest things, and he would hear this crazy madness going on. I would look for something in this huge box, throwing things all over the studio, and then we would suddenly try out this next sketch idea. And I mean, obviously we prepared as well. Bob Burke, the designer, was amazing. He would come up with these amazing constructions, and Bob Burke was at TVAM as well, and Doug Wilcox, and then they both went to Ragdoll. And Bob Burke went on to design the Rosie and Jim boat, the Tots TV house, Teletubby Land, and so he was our designer for many years.
Wow. So you mentioned Anne Wood there, and obviously Anne Wood is the lady behind Ragdoll Productions. And was Pod's program then one of the, or if not the first program that they produced?
Yeah, there was something else called Storytime, which used the Boat. I think that was probably Ragdoll's first TV show, but certainly I had worked with Anne Wood. I had auditioned for her at TVAM, and I'd come up with 6 little puppet sketches on a show called Rubber Dub Dub. And so we had already started to work together a little bit at TVAM. And then when she left TVAM and started Ragdoll Productions, I went with her, and the first show that we did together was Bob, yes.
Ah, well, there you go, yeah. I remember Storytime very vividly because it was one of those shows they would show us when we were at school. So, yeah, I do remember those in the mornings, yeah. Yeah, had many presenters.
And that's why Ragdoll owned this canal boat that turned into the Ragdoll Rosie and Jim boat.
Oh, really?
Because she already had bought that boat and built it to film that her first show, Storytime.
Yeah. So what came after Pop's programme for you then, Mr. Robin Stevens?
Well, Pop lasted for about, I don't know how many years it was a funny old thing because they would shoot all the other bits of Pop and then I would come in and link it. And I would be in the studio for like 12 hours a day, it felt like. So it was very intense, short studios for me where we would just shoot link after link after link. And I would hear Anne Wood sitting in the control room going faster, faster. But after Pop, the very next thing I did with Ragdoll anyway was Rosie and Jim. I did some other shows at the BBC in the meantime. I did a show. The first show I did at the BBC was called Whiz, which was a computer television show, introducing children to video games, I think.
Oh, I see.
And I played a character called Whiz, his little white... I was Bug. I was a little character called Bug. And I was also the voice of the computer around that time. But yes, Rosie and Jim was the next show I did with Ragdoll Productions.
Okay. Were you surprised at how big Pod actually was and how he's still loved today? I mean, you could say he's quite iconic. I mean, that character is quite... You look at him and think there's no one like him now, and I don't think there ever will be anyone like him.
Yeah, I mean, it's partly due to the amazing design of John Blundell, my mentor. What an amazing character. Yeah. I mean, Anne Wood had the idea for Pop. She was sitting on a train one day and she saw a child misting. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if they have them anymore, but they used to have glass compartments for each seating area. And there was a child outside her seating compartment on the train, misting up the back of the window and writing his name in it. And that's kind of where she got the idea of this little goblin baby, basically, television goblin baby that lived inside. In the days when your TV was a box, she actually lived inside the box. Banged on the side of the box. Yes. But of course, it doesn't work anymore now. It's a flat screen idea. But
yeah, exactly. Yes, and you don't have people like him interrupting your television every 5 seconds.
No. But originally, we tried to use a steam kettle to actually create steam on the window of the glass of the TV.
Oh yeah.
And so I had a boiling pipe coming up my arm.
Yeah.
With real steam coming out to go on the screen, and all that happened, of course, is it sort of burned my arm, but it was quite
how things have changed. How things have changed. This is how kids' television worked back then, people. Yeah, he had to find steam from any which means he could.
we certainly tried to blow.
Yes, yeah. It's like, you can't imagine having to go through all of that now, can you?
I know. Yeah. But the lovely thing about the team we had at Ragdoll was people would try things.
Yeah.
The lovely thing about someone like Bob, the designer, he knew he had been in television long enough where he knew how to make things happen without huge, costly effects. He could make things happen in a really simple way that looked amazing.
Yeah, a lot of things back then, as you mentioned. A lot of reasons why programs were created and a lot of reasons why storylines were developed was, as you said, because, people like Anne would watch children and watch everyday life and pick up things and think, I think that could work.
Yeah, I mean, Ragdoll was, Anne always had the intention of, that was our motto, works for children, Ragdoll works for children, and that was always... We had a whole department that would have children sit down and watch our TV shows, the very early edit, and then we would watch the children's body language and see which bits they enjoyed and which bits they kind of looked away from, and would get rid of that bit. If there was a bit that didn't hold the kids' attention, she would edit it out. You know, so it really was. We were really thinking what works for children, what they find funny, what they understand, and how to communicate things that they really, you know, they really get. And so it really was working. We really were working for the kids.
Yeah.
At that company.
And there's nothing better than a perfect audience of kids, because they will be brutally honest as well at the same time. If something doesn't work, they will tell you, or they will just switch off.
And the lovely thing is that a lot of adults don't quite understand, because we were making those shows totally. I don't know if you know, but Laurel and Hardy used to work in the same way. They would show an audience the first edit, you know, where everything was not quite fully edited, and they would time how long people laugh for, and they would actually, if you watch a Laurel and Hardy movie, they're actually quite long, and it feels like there's lots of gaps, but they were actually allowing for people to laugh or to understand what was happening in the same way that we were. And some adults look at Ragdoll shows and think they're a little weird, but actually it was because we were making them for the kids, not for adults. I live in America, so I'm trying to remember how to speak English.
He does, yes. Just to say, we are kind of 6 hours behind here, so it's like, is it 9 o'clock in the evening for me, which is bizarre doing a podcast this late, but yeah, it works. But you say that. Adults sit and think, well, this is a bit strange. But I always think the best television for kids is when there are storylines and jokes that can just sometimes gently go over children's heads, and the adults are sitting there thinking, okay, now I don't have to sit through an hour of this, you know what. I'm actually quite enjoying it myself.
Yeah. I've been a parent myself, so you do appreciate that.
Yeah.
If you can actually enjoy watching the same show 300 times.
Yes.
As well,
yes. Exactly. And
although I did have some parents come up to me, after I had been making television for a few years, and say, I had to listen to your voice for 10 years, and I think I don't really like you. I've had a lot of adults say, about Rosie and Jim that they didn't know how a house got thatched or a shoe got on a horse or whatever. They were quite interested to find out. I explained it. When I wrote the scripts, I would find, I would go and visit a man who makes bells, and he would explain to me how they had made bells for centuries and really complicated, stuff. And then I would boil it down to, basically just these three things.
Yeah.
And then I would try and make it funny at the same time. But I would try and make the humor about the actual information I was trying to get
the
over,
situation.
So it wouldn't distract from it. It would actually be part of the kids getting to understand what others made.
Very clever. We would.
Did you know that Rosie and Jim was the first television show in the whole of England ever to sell 1 million videos?
Wow.
More before Disney ever did.
Nobody can say anything bad about that, can they? Because they spoke up, and when you relied on videotapes back then to actually, see whether a program was successful or not.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
You just don't get that now. People have streaming platforms now and all this sort of stuff. Videotapes are just, they are a thing of the past, but back then a lot of companies, including Ragdoll, I guess, relied on video sales.
Yeah, totally. Videos was a whole other thing that happened, just about around where Rosie and Jim happened. When I first started in television, I used to get repeat feeds because they would show the same television show again, and people would watch it because they had never seen it before. But now, of course, it's a completely different world.
And of course, with the interest of video sales and merchandise and productions, that would lead me on to talk about the one place I always wanted to visit when I was younger, the Ragdoll shop.
Yes. Yeah, we were very proud of the shop because, most people, when they set up a retail space, they mostly make it so that it's all about trying to make as much money as possible. But we actually only had a very small part of the shop where we actually sold merchandise. Most of it was a way for us to actually. It was great as a writer because you could see how children related to the characters. We had phones where you could talk to the characters.
So a lot of that space then was made up of well, it was a space really for children just to come and interact with the characters.
Yeah, and feel like they had somehow interacted with the characters, which is what fun. We used to get all these lovely, sweet letters, you know, because we had post boxes where children could post their letters, and we would. It was amazing to read all those letters from children.
Yeah, it's so innocent, really, back then, wasn't it? You know, all that stuff. Really, a more innocent time than what it is now, when kids' television was kind of made properly. You know, Ragdoll Productions really took care and pride in what they actually produced. As you said, they had kids in mind. They were at the forefront of everything they did.
I mean, it is amazing now that everyone could make television, because, you know, at the time we used to only have 3 customers. We could only sell to ITV, BBC, or Channel 4, or whatever.
Right.
But now, you know, we used to say, wouldn't it be amazing if we just had our own aerial on the roof where we could transmit around the world?
Oh, gosh,
and now, of course, you're doing that very same thing from where you are. So, of course, the only downside of that is, since everyone can make television and everyone is, then there's no budgets left for it. So there's no money left.
No, right.
You know, it's all so dissipated.
Yeah, and there's a lot of animation now as well, which makes it very, very easy for people to transmit it all over the world, because they can just dub it into any language.
Indeed.
Yeah. But anyhow, what we need out of that is we need a Ragdoll channel now. Somewhere has to pick up a Ragdoll channel, just broadcast all the Ragdoll programs, have Pod interrupting everything again. Let's just go back to that time.
Linked by Pop, Sean.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Right. So you mentioned there one of the very first programs that you did after Pod with Ragdoll, amongst all their many other programs that they did. You know, I think there was a program I remember that Ragdoll did, which was called Playbox.
Ah, yes.
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 Are you going to tell me you were involved with that now?
I actually wasn't. No, I don't think I was involved in Playbox at all. Which is weird.
Okay. Good. That's quite refreshing, because every time I mention a program, the guests always go, "Oh yes, I was in that, or I was involved with that." You weren't involved in Play School, were you?
I was.
Oh!
Well, no, only very peripherally. And I got a call from Play School one day where I think they had a puppeteer who was going to do something on some special, who let them down, and so at the last minute I went in there and operated this puppet, and then that's actually how I got all my TV work. I think they liked what I did, and they, you know, every time someone in the East Tower, as it was in Shepherd's Bush, asks if anyone knew a good puppeteer, I think I was a fairly good puppeteer, but I was extremely reliable. I would deliver. I would make the puppets I said I would make, and I would arrive on time, which is the other reason why you succeed in this world, everybody.
Yes, he says to me he was 20 minutes late. Aimed at me, yes. I was about to say, that doesn't count, but it kind of does, because you kind of just said you owe a lot to Play School for what you did. I was hoping there would be one guest that says to me, I wasn't involved in Play School, but every single damn guest I speak to...
I was actually on a Christmas special. They didn't have the person that normally got in the goose.
Right.
And I was about twice the size of someone that should be in the goose, but somehow they crammed me into the golden goose, and I was in his Christmas special. You see, isn't it funny how every time I do a podcast, it kind of leads to Play School. As much as I love Play School, I'm tired of hearing Play School. So let's go on to talk about one program that a lot of my viewers will fondly remember you for being a part of. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier on, and that was a certain Rosie and Jim. Imagine if that's all you had to do in that program was just provide Duck's voice. But I should imagine that might have been the hardest thing you would have had to do on that show. Duck was interesting. Yeah, when we were first conceiving of the show, we were trying to think, because if you look at all Ragdoll shows, we always have this kind of other small little character, like on Tots TV we had Furry Boo, and on Teletubbies there was the what's it called, the vacuum cleaner or whatever he was called.
Nunu.
There was always that kind of funny other character. And on Rosie and Jim, we thought of him as the link between the real world and the kind of magical world of Rosie and Jim, these dolls that came alive. And anyway, we were trying to think of what would live on a canal boat, whether it was a duck or at one point, it was a duck that followed the boat along, or I can't remember all the different ideas we had. And I was trying to think what kind of duck would be associated with canal boat. I had just gone to the library actually, because there was no Google in those days, and I was just photocopying.
No Google.
And I was walking down the road carrying all these photocopies of ducks. And in the shop window, I was in Winchester in Hampshire, and I looked in this carpet shop window, and in the window was this carved wooden Indian duck. And I was thinking, that's painted, in the same, kind of in a similar way to a canal boat, and it seemed perfect. So I went in and I said, I have to buy your duck, and they were like, it's a display duck. We're not going to sell it to you. And I was like, no, I have to buy it. And they sold it to me eventually. And then I carved this version of that Indian duck, an animated one. Bob Burke always laughed about the fact I arrived for the pilot with this thing unassembled as a kit of parts, and we had to try and put it together in time for the shot, because I've been up all night painting and trying to make it work.
Yeah, and they're sitting there thinking, do you realise why he had to buy that duck now? Do you realise all these years later why?
Because I had to carve the whole thing and then try and figure out how the head turned and the wings flap.
Yeah.
When you're first making something, it's obvious now what duck looks like, but of course, when you're first making it, you have to try and think it all through.
Yeah. Have you gone back to those people and actually said to them, this is the reason I brought your duck?
Oh, oh my goodness, it was so long ago now, Sean, and I don't even know if that carpet shop's still there.
Right, yeah. They're probably thinking, oh, okay, well, we want the royalties. Sign on the dotted line. We want our share.
There was a weird thing which happened when I had that duck for some reason in the pub, and I forgot it. I left it under my chair.
Yeah.
And I think I don't remember what I was doing with this duck, and I forgot it, and I went back, and it was on a high shelf. They had built it into the display of this pub, and I was like, that's my duck, give it back.
Yeah, that's my duck. Little do you know he's going to be famous in 10 years' time. That's my duck. Well, that's a really interesting story. So that's Duck's story out of the way. So how did the sort of mad world of Rosie and Jim actually come about? Because the episodes were starring originally, and the books, of course, were written by John Cunliffe.
Well, the first ones were. John Cunliffe wrote the first series and some of the books, but I wrote most of the series and most of the books.
Right.
But John Cunliffe was a marvellous chap and an amazing writer who wrote Puss and Pat.
Yeah.
Rosie and Jim came, first of all, the name Rosie, I don't know if you've ever seen the back of the canal boats, but they have these beautiful designs on them, the old ones when they were actually being used to transport coal and so forth. They had this tiny little cabin where big families used to live. And anyway, they made their boats beautiful by painting these beautiful designs called roses and castles. And that's where the name Rosie came from, roses and castles. And then the name Jim, we just sat there. I have a long list somewhere in my attic saying Rosie and Mike, Rosie and Dave, Rosie and Jim just seemed to fit.
Yeah. So it just seemed to be the choice that fitted with Rosie. It could, Rosie and Bob doesn't seem quite the same, does it? No.
Yeah.
So and you were behind the not just the voice of Duck and Jim, but the puppeteering of Jim as well, and the way that he looked, because you created all of those.
Yeah, I actually went and interviewed a very old man who had worked on the canal boats when they actually were working boats before they became tourist attractions, where you go on holiday. Yeah. And he told me all about, they were called monkey boats at one point because they were covered in children, and people had more children in those days. But he told me, and so Jim's costume is actually designed around, what they would have worn. They probably would have worn that kind of thing with her. And then Rosie's costume don't know how Rosie's costume came about really, but yeah, the idea behind Rosie and Jim were that they were two, old ragdolls that had been left on this boat, which is quite sweet now. When you look in lots of canal boats, you see Rosie and Jim sitting there. But their kind of idea came from that one of these boats had just, had these children living on it, and they'd left these two old ragdolls on the boat, and there was a writer, a children's writer living on the boat, and then there was a children's book illustrator living on the boat, and then a songwriter. And so we had these three artists living on the boat, and the idea was they were trying to think of ideas of what Rosie and Jim would do if they came alive. And of course, we all knew the secret was the children knew that they actually did come alive, but they didn't know it. It was quite sweet, actually. Neil sometimes says that children would come up to him and tell him that Rosie and Jim come alive, and he would like, no, that's ridiculous.
That's brilliant. So even away from the cameras, he's still like, no, Rose, no, I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't think so.
No. That's just brilliant. Well, good for him. Brilliant. So yeah, and Ragdoll had that kind of theme across a lot of their programs, including Tots TV, which we'll come on to, where the characters only really come out when the adults aren't about, and that was very prominent in what the success of Rosie and Jim was. It was quite. To look back now, you're right. It was quite a romantic show in that way, that they were so well loved, not just by children and parents, but you could see they genuinely loved each other. They cared so much.
That was my ambition, really. Like I said at the beginning, for my shows,
right.
I wanted to show. You don't actually see characters on TV often in children's television. Showing affection for each other.
Right.
Actually, Rebecca Nagan and I really do like each other, so that helped.
Yeah,
but,
yes, it does help to have that connection, and of course
we had a lot of fun together. When we were inside that sofa, we would have like 6 bars of chocolate all laid down on our little shelf, and between takes we'd be eating chocolate, and laughing, because they were all having fun and having cups of tea out there half the time, and they would forget to tell us.
Yeah,
and we'd be left locked in this sofa.
So explain to us how this works then. You spoke about the locked-in sofa, and Rebecca Nagan obviously providing the wonderful voice of Rosie. Explain to us how the puppeteering worked on that show, because it was, as you said, a real boat, and you filmed in the actual boat itself. Yeah, we didn't film in a studio ever on that show. It was all set on the actual boat, and it was... I don't know if you've seen canal boats, but they're not wide. They're as wide as a car or something. So, and I'm 6'1", and Rebecca. And you've got to fit a full camera crew in there as well. Yeah. My word. Yeah, Derek, the cameraman, was. We had this amazing platform that Bob designed. Yeah. That kind of clipped on the side of the boat, but there was nothing really to stop him and his camera falling in. No, I can imagine. It was all, and then we had a whole generator on the back that generated the power so we could have lighting as we motored along. Yeah. And then we had a support boat driven by Jeff, who would also make us breakfast in the morning. He hated making breakfast, but yeah, we had a whole support boat with a toilet on it, and the tables, with benches so we could eat breakfast. And I think sometimes they would bring lunch in as well from it. And they would have benches where if you sat on the join between 2 benches, it would pinch you. It was quite uncomfortable. So a lot of your time was spent in a boat, hours on end, trapped on this boat with cameras pointing in your face. I mean, you can't imagine it now working, can you? When you think about it, I mean, what a lovely job. Absolutely, absolutely. My job was to try, for a couple of months a year to get together with all these lovely people and travel around with a beautiful boat. And we would go to different parts of England and see all these beautiful places. Yeah, because the majority was on location, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a little more scary for me because I had to write the scripts and make sure that they worked. Because if you get back with a television show for Anne Wood that she doesn't like, it doesn't go well for you. So yes, yeah. It's like, now I've wrote this, now I've also got to perform it as well at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. So, it must be really interesting actually reading your own lines and thinking, I'm actually playing Jim now, but I've wrote his lines. So did you have any lead way of saying, actually, I'm just going to change this bit here?
Well, yeah, you do feel like it gives you some license to actually
Yeah.
improvise it. And the lovely thing was that Rebecca and I were, so it makes it a lot more fun for us. And also, because we're reacting to actual things going past, you don't really know what's going to happen when you're in the real world with real things happening.
Yeah. So
you
that
have to
takes
kind
us
of go
on
with
to the
flow.
presenters themselves, because they were in the real world, and the presenters almost played themselves, with the exception of Neil, who was more of a sort of more eccentric in what he did. He was playing himself, but on a whole nother level.
I have to tell you, Sean, Neil is fairly eccentric. Don't tell him I told you.
Okay. Oh.
But Anne Wood's philosophy is to show children the real world.
Yeah.
So, when she has someone being a writer on a canal boat, it's a real canal boat, and John Cunliffe is a real children's writer.
Yes.
He's not an actor pretending to be a writer. And Pat Hutchins was a very well-known book illustrator, and so that's the lovely thing is about the way Ragdoll has always worked, is that it's trying to show children exactly what's really happening in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I would, me and my assistant would go to a whole lot of different locations to try and find ideas for shows, and then I would write it up and have it, approved by Anne and all the educational advisors, and I would have to get it past the director and the designers, and then quite often you had to storyboard the whole thing, and then you would probably. I would actually, now I come to think of it, I would call up Neil, and I would call up all of the presenters and say, would you be willing to go water skiing, before I even started?
Yeah.
And Neil would always generally just say yes,
Right.
We did crazy things with Neil, which kind of made it a lot more fun for me to write. Because,
absolutely.
He was younger and kind of more agile than
absolutely. And they all had nicknames aching to their professions, didn't they?
Yeah. We would come up with it. Well, it started with John being Fizz Dog because he had a white beard. Right. And then Loopy. I remember we struggled a bit with Pat but she had these wonderful earrings, so we called her Loopy. Yeah. And Neil was amazing. I mean, because I like I said, we based the show on what really happened historically on the canal boats. I think people would have played the squeeze box more than they would have played the guitar, which is Neil's natural instrument. So he actually learned to play the squeeze box for the show, amazingly.
Yeah. Wow.
The amazing thing with Andrew McCrory's Shand, our musician, who would get the tapes finally edited and he had to put music on them, he didn't complain when we did. When Rosie and Jim sang a song, we never actually had a pitch in our ear, or we would just start singing in whatever pitch, anywhere on the scale, and he would pitch shift it and actually make it sound musical amazingly.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And so are you, not that we would know by watching Jim's dulcet tones, his very nasally tones. Absolutely. You can still do his voice after all these years.
Oh, yeah. The nice thing about being a puppeteer is you can still do the voice when you're old.
There we go. Yeah. Now, that was 1990. Can you believe it? I know I'm making you feel rather old there. It was actually 3 years before I was born. Can you believe that?
No,
yeah,
no,
3 years before I was born.
I think you're wrong there, Sean.
I'm wrong. Let's just say I'm wrong. But 1993 is a groundbreaking year because not only do I turn 30, but this program here also turns 30 people as well. Another program that you were very much involved with, and that is Tots TV.
Ah, yes, Tots TV. I mean, Rosie and Jim was all about showing the real world to children. And then I had always wanted to do a show that more looked into feelings, the feelings of being a child, what you do with those feelings, and how you relate to other people, and those interpersonal things. I wanted to do a show about that, and that's kind of where Tots TV came from.
Okay, so it was very much about, it was the family setting. And you had your character, of course, Tom, sort of played the father figure to maybe Tiny, who was the little brother in a sense, and then you had the big sister or big auntie that was, of course, Tilly. and she was a French character.
Yeah, I remember when Anne wanted to make her other in some way,
Right.
a stand-apart character that was somehow other from the other characters, and how you deal with people that are other to you. And when she first suggested that we have a character in the show that only speaks another language, I remember Andy, who plays Tiny, and I kind of were looking at each other going, well, how's that going to work? It just seemed like a mad. I mean, no, I don't think anyone had ever done that before, and Anne's willing to push the boundaries like that. I don't. Andy luckily spoke better French than I did, but
yes.
We would write the scripts, but of course Andy and I wrote the scripts, so we felt the permission to deviate from them and improvise and have fun.
Yeah.
And then Tilly was like, well, I want to do that too, right? So sometimes she would improvise her lines in French, and Andy and I would look at each other and like, I have no idea what she
And now you
said.
just have to repeat exactly what she said so everybody can understand.
Our job was to repeat in English everything she said in a kind of conversational sort of way.
Yeah.
But, we did actually have to understand what she said in order to do that.
Yeah, isn't it funny how television works like that? It's every conversation is like, I literally have to tell you what she said in French and make it sound like it's a conversation.
Right, that's right. And, amazingly, 3 different people played Tilly over the years. I think we made Tots TV for quite a while. I can't remember, was it 9 years, I think? But so we had Veronique, Claire, and Alex all play. I don't think they could. Andy and I were a little difficult. We were because we wrote the scripts. We were probably a little hard to work with. So I can understand why they might have wanted to go do something else.
It's not a busy schedule. It's just it's hard work doing this show.
Well, and also puppetry is hard. Because you're holding the arm up, and you get to we used to try and make it as comfortable as possible, but you get to pain factor. If you have a take that lasts 5-10 minutes or whatever, it's it can get quite painful. You get to pain factor 8 or 9.
Yeah, I can imagine. So talk to us about the set of Tots TV, because like Rosie and Jim, everything is natural. It's all authentic. It's outdoors. Like the Ragdoll, well, you've built this rather large cottage that the Tots lived in, a real life-sized model of a house.
Yeah, it's the ultimate playhouse, really.
Yeah.
I mean, what we discovered, of course, on Rosie and Jim is that in English weather, you can't always be filming outside because a lot of the time pouring with rain. So we could set up at a moment's notice. Well, with an hour or two's notice, you could start. You could set up inside or outside both of those spaces, which was perfect because it means whenever it's a beautiful sunny day, you're filming outside, and when it's not, you're filming inside. But Bob Burke created this ultimate playhouse. I think often when a child is playing in their own imagination, they're in their own world. They don't have adults living in their play.
No.
Their play versus reality. They're there with themselves and their friends. And so that was, it wasn't like we're suggesting that Tom and Tilly and Tiny lived on their own without adults, but in a child's imagination, you do, don't you? So you're in your playhouse, and you're playing with your friends. And so the lovely thing about the way the show worked at the beginning, before ITV cut it in half, because it used to be a 15-minute show, and then it turned into a 7-minute show towards the end.
Right.
But the lovely thing about when it first started was we would go out into the real world and see something, and then we would come back to the house and do a...
So you'd see the contrast of a day,
Discovered in the world and make it, and actually have some sort of story about what they had actually learned.
Right, I see. Yeah, very, very, very clever. Yeah, and one of the things I remember about the longer episodes is the little bit that you narrated during that, which was the ARC stories.
Yeah. I mean, one year ITV, I've forgotten why it was, but they suddenly needed 100 shows in 1 year or something mad. I mean, normally we would come up. A normal series was 20. I would work on writing and performing, half my year would be 25 Rosie and Jim.
Goodness.
So 100 scripts was like, and I think Andy was already starting to work on Teletubbies, and I was still working on Rosie and Jim. So and both of us worked, had both of those writing commitments as well. But then we had to write 100 Tots TVs as well, so that was quite a busy year. But that was actually when we came up with things like the Noah's Ark.
Yeah, they were cut down from 15 minutes to 7 minutes, which meant that the majority of what happened was in the actual Tots house in later series.
True.
So take us through, a day's filming in the Tots house, because I should imagine with puppets you would have a lowered ground in the actual house itself, where you'd sort of be able to operate the puppets, because the house, although you'd think, it's actually quite small.
Yeah. You wouldn't believe how many times we all bumped our heads, because the beams were down here. So it was designed for people the Tots size, not for us.
Yeah.
We're still having to work in this environment. So yeah, we would often bang our heads. When we wrote a script, to start with, we would make them too complicated, and then Anne was like, "You've got to keep it down to 3 setups, because when you're moving a crew and a camera and things around, it takes it can take an hour or two to light it and set all the because the designers and the lighting people all have to have their turn to make it right before we film. So we would write around these 3 setups of camera setups and lighting setups, and we actually had these chairs designed so we could actually a lot of if you watch the Muppets working, they're generally working right above their heads, and the set is 6 foot above the ground, whereas we did actually have we had a cellar underneath that we could make holes in the floor, but that was only when the Tots were kind of sitting on the floor. I don't know if you ever saw an episode where there was they were making circles of their own color around them, and there was a top shot looking down on the floor, and that's how we did that. We're actually under the floor, operating through a little hole.
Very clever.
And we have little TVs that we're watching, and Andy and I think I definitely managed to smash one of those TVs on that day, and they're quite expensive, so people weren't that happy with that. But we actually had these special seats that we would lie down on that allowed us to be quite close to the floor, and we would have all these special cushions and things because it sounds like we're making ourselves comfortable, but when it gets really painful and the take has to last a long time, you don't want to be thinking about yourself and your own comfort. You want to make sure that all your energy is going onto the screen. Absolutely,
and you've got to provide the voice as well at the same time.
Yeah. We had a microphone right here. We would wear a headband and have a microphone right there, and we'd have a little television monitor right here, so we could see what we're doing like this. Yeah. Hopefully that television monitor lasts, unlike the last one. But yeah. And at the end of the day, quite often we would do these leg shots, and of course when the Tots' legs run through shot, our own legs can't get into the shot, so you find yourself leaning over to try and that was.
I see. That's why you never actually saw the body and the legs together.
No, because they were actually always filmed completely separately, unless you're sitting on a chair or something.
Oh, I see.
In the same way that Rosie and Jim had a couch, we also had a couch. Remembering now, where the Tots could sit, and that also had a little slot at the back, like Rosie and Jim, where we could.
Oh yes, I remember.
And so they could sit on the couch, and you could see their legs at the same time.
And that's where they would tell the stories. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Wow, you have a good memory.
Yeah, no, I do remember that, because they would, in the early days, they would have their little, what was it they had? Their little woolen dolls.
That's right. Each one of them had their own sort of woolen teddy bear.
That's right. You're welcome. I'm your encyclopedia for today. And come to me, not Wikipedia. You won't get any lies. I promise you. So yeah.
I was actually there, and I don't remember.
Well, it was a long time ago.
That's true.
I should imagine it was. Didn't the donkey's shed have two doors, one at the front, one at the back?
Yeah, we have one to get the donkey in and out, because sometimes when we, like I said, we had all these special chairs that were low down.
Yeah.
And when that's all set up, it's a massive. Because we had 2 arms sometimes, so if you want both arms working, I'm doing Tom's head like this, and I'm operating his hand like this.
Yeah.
But then if you want that hand to work, you have to have someone else down here.
Provide the other hand.
So it could be
I
6
see.
people at least, all piled up in the camp. So you don't want to move anything if you want to get Donkey in it, because you wouldn't have Donkey sitting there while we're setting up.
No,
so,
right.
We wouldn't generally use the actual door that you see in the show for Donkey. We would use the one at the back to get him in
Yeah,
and
I
out.
see.
When
Okay.
we're finally, because obviously we're rehearsing without him.
Yeah.
He got bored pretty quick, and he would start grabbing the puppet. He would grab the puppet's buttons in his mouth and try and pull them off and so forth. He was a cantankerous.
I'm guessing he
chap.
wasn't called Donkey. Do you remember his actual name?
I think he was called Ben. He was actually
Ben?
a rescue donkey, and I think he'd had a little bit of a hard life. And Jane, who was our animal handler on the show, she did the rabbits on Teletubbies, and she handled all the animals at a Ragdoll. I think she was called Jane.
Was she the lady that actually appeared in the series itself?
Oh, she was also called Jane.
Because she would do outside scenes with lots of different animals.
Yeah, she was actually a zoologist.
Oh, I see.
The Jane on camera, what was her name, man? But yeah, no, we had this lovely lady that looked at all the animals, and she used to take Ben home and look after him.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, Ben definitely had an interesting life, I think.
Yes, yes. Who was the little character that came on with the cap? Jack?
Was that on? Oh, Jack. Oh, you mean where he would build sort of ball runs? And
Yeah, he would build with all the kids. Yeah, he had a little hat.
Jack. That was Jack. Yeah, he was actually called Gary Stevens.
Okay.
And you can hear his voice.
No relation to you then.
Singing Teletubbies. That's his voice singing
Oh,
that song in the English version. Gary Stevens. Yeah, we actually met Gary and Andy, who was tiny on Tots TV, but then also went on to make Teletubbies with Edward and In the Night Garden and all these things. Him and Gary, we first saw them in this crazy stage show called Animal, I think it was called, and it was like they were performance artists, and I remember this whole stage was covered with teddy bears, and they were Andy definitely was quite an eerie presence on the stage, and of course when I came to teach him puppetry, he learned it in about half an hour.
Wow.
Mostly it took me a couple of weeks to teach someone puppetry, but Andy had always had this party trick of doing this funny little voice, which turned into Tiny's voice, and he just became a puppeteer kind of just in an hour or two.
Oh, there you go.
Never looked back.
So explain to people how the upstairs scenes worked in the bedrooms, because there wasn't. It didn't actually lead to anything, did it? When you went upstairs.
When you see you can see the stairs going up.
Yeah.
And I think there is a little door you can open at the top of the stair. But that's it. Beyond that, it's just an empty void.
Yeah.
We actually had a control room and a props room behind down the bottom of those stairs. But there's actually no bedroom up there. I'm sorry to disappoint you all.
Oh.
But the way that we did the bedroom was the design department would, just redress an area downstairs.
Oh, really?
And put a bed in there, just change the objects on the shelves, and it's amazing how it had the same curtains.
How simple and clever,
It's amazing how quickly. Don't believe everything you see on television, everybody, because a lot of it's not real.
No. Yeah. And now everyone's going, "You've ruined the magic for us now." I was like, no. People are gonna go back and watch that now and think, he's not upstairs, he's downstairs.
Yeah, same curtain.
It's the same curtain. Look out for the curtains, people. Same curtains. Same company, same curtains. They shopped at Alders. Anyway, I always remember loving the upstairs scenes, particularly. But for you, working on the show, is there a particular fond memory of that show, an episode or a scene that you particularly enjoyed writing and doing or producing?
I mean, talking of the bedroom, it reminded me of when my son was born, and I needed to have some time off.
Right.
While I was in the middle of filming Tots TV to go and have my son.
Ah.
And so we had this idea of just writing a whole bunch of scripts that didn't really, or where Tom was separate from the others, and so they could record all their scenes while I was off having air in my son.
Right.
Well, my wife did most of the work, but
Yeah.
yeah. So that was one of the particular scripts that we did, where Tom was in bed and they were trying to wake him up, and I filmed that before I went off to support my son being born.
Mm-hmm.
But my favourite episode of Tots TV, I mean, I think going to Lapland was amazing.
Right.
We used to go to work every morning on skidoos, and we would have these amazing snowsuits and lie in the snow, and you know, we really were filming with sleighs and Santa. We went to the place where all Santa's letters go from all over the world.
Yeah.
It was just an amazing experience going to Lapland.
Loved it.
Staying in character a lot of the time.
Loved it. So you were both working on Tots TV and Rosie and Jim at the same time. The majority of it was working. So how do you differentiate the voice of Tom and Jim?
Yeah, well, some people say I didn't, but Tom was meant to be kind of more slightly older, and
right.
You know, Jim was meant to be. I mean, Anne always said she kind of regretted giving them their hair made out of wool, because
right.
it did make some people mistake Rosie and Jim for Tots, and the Tots TV hair, the Tots hair could have been made out of anything at that point.
Right. Yeah.
But so, I guess I was used to wool at the time, but yeah, I think of him. You know, I thought of him as older and kind of slightly more pompous.
Yeah.
Jim is kind of sweeter and kinder, and I don't think Ragdolls have anything going on in their brain. Basically.
Right.
They just have fluff. So.
Tom would actually have a tie, though. Rosie and Jim. Rosie and Jim.
Okay, they do kind of sound the same now.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Not that as a child you're sitting there thinking, oh, they do sound the same.
I think, like I say, I just wanted something I could do easily. That
Yeah.
would
It means you could go in and out of each production and think, oh, there's no work to be done here on these voices. I could just go from one to another there, from Tom to Jim.
I think I did try to make a different show, but
yeah, I think, yeah, okay, you try to make them different, and he's just proved that on camera. There's hardly any difference at all there, people. There's a lot of difference. There is. I remember in an interview, and the actress Judy Cornwall came out in an interview from Keeping Up Appearances, saying that when she was playing Daisy, halfway through the run, she had to learn how to play Daisy's voice, because she'd been in the theatre for many years and her voice is naturally very deep, and all of a sudden she had to come back into production and she had to use her voice in a higher pitch, which was quite interesting. And I loved Keeping Up Appearances, and I loved Dame Patrica Routledge, as I'm sure you do as well, because she was the narrator on one of the shows you're going to talk to us about now. Do you like the segue there? And I had the absolute privilege of meeting Dame Patrica Routledge last year in the theatre. She was wonderful. At 93, as bright as a button, and she still remembers everything that she had done. Working on the show Blips, was it? Did you ever get the chance to meet her?
I don't think I did, because I would record all my parts separately,
right.
And I don't think I ever did meet her, actually. I mean, I felt like I did, because we worked together on that show very intimately. But,
and that was one of the rare shows that you actually had a acting role in, besides puppeteering.
Well, yeah. It all started with Bohbah, where I was grandpa, which we filmed in Spain on the beach, amazingly, which wasn't the worst job for a year and a half in Spain.
No?
But and then I think Anne was pleased with how the kids had reacted to grandpa, and so she was thinking maybe I should try my hand at my own sort of Mr. Bean for little children. So that's how Blips happened. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, and of course
it was funny, because I thought of myself like a puppet, even though I was a human being, but I operated myself as if I was a puppet, I think.
Yeah, a lot of slapstick in that show as well.
Yeah.
Brilliantly, very physical.
In both of them, yeah. It's funny, because I'd had back surgery not that long before I did Bohbah, and but yeah, I think my back had healed enough to be able to do quite some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
It was fun. And on Bohbah, it was really fun. We'd go out to dinner, and the cast had been carefully selected to be a representative of every different type of body type and ethnicity and whatever. And people would see us out to dinner and wonder if we were the, NATO or something. what we were all doing in Spain together.
Yeah,
They were a great cast to work with. Blips was a little more lonely because it was just me and Patricia, but I never actually worked with her because she would do her voiceover after it had been edited and it had been decided how the show was going to work. But it was a lot of fun. The cast, the crew would, at the end of the Blips show, I would generally, Mr. Perfect wouldn't be quite as perfect as he thought he was at the end. And the whole crew were throwing bananas and meringue and cream at me.
Messy job.
Yeah, messy job.
Yes, as everything you've worked on, messy job.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the characters were messy.
Rebecca and I were always laughing how, our job was to completely mess up both, and then we would walk away and have a cup of tea and leave poor Penny and everyone, the design
just to
team,
clean up. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty tough.
Yeah, the amount of banana skins you had to go through, honestly. Yeah.
And the puppets were covered in mess, and then they would have to clean them up and try and get them ready for the next take. But it wasn't our job to not throw things around. That was our job.
What a job to have. Yeah. What a job to have. It's like I wrote it and I can get away with it.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was a point of honour that we didn't want to go half.
No.
We didn't want to go half. We wanted,
exactly.
If you're going to end up in a mess, it wants to be in a real mess.
Yeah, exactly. And it helps that the production and the team are behind you with that as well, and knowing that it works.
They didn't hate us that much.
No.
Well, I don't to ask them.
Now, I know that the Ragdoll boat is sitting somewhere with new owners. And it's not changed that dramatically, but one thing that has changed, sadly, is the Tots house. Because it's still there where it has been all these years, but it's in a farmer's field, and just across from the farmer's field is where Teletubby Land was, when it was actually a real land.
Yeah, me and my assistant Paul were given the job of finding somewhere to build the Tots house, and, I don't think there wasn't the Google Maps and things in those days.
Right.
We were looking for places to build a little copse of wood somewhere nearby where we could get permission to build this house. And finally, we found the perfect place in this farmer's field, but it was pretty close to their house. And I think when they gave permission for us to build the Tots house there, they didn't realize that a few years later we'd be coming back to ask if we could build the Teletubby Land, which turns into, there were helicopters looking for this place with the press, and it turned into I think they might have cursed the day that we knocked on their door asking if we could build a house there.
Maybe, yeah. There's lots of people now on YouTube who have videoed themselves going to the Tots house. Do not do it, people, because the farmer or the owner of the land actually gets quite frustrated with people just crossing over his land. It is private land, so I wouldn't do it. But people, I understand that people are going to some interest, and it is a piece of history.
Well, Sean, I'm really sorry to have to tell you, but the house is no longer there. It's been removed because the farmer got a lot tired of walking through his garden. So I can understand why he did that, because it is his private land, and but you can see the house anytime you like by watching the videos. But the house,
of course, you can.
Sadly, is no longer there.
But so that
turn Teletubby Land into a pond, into a nice duck pond or whatever. So it's all gone. There's nothing there to see, guys. So
well, that was a bit disheartening. I thought you was going to say they turned it into this £1 million mansion. It's like, no, it's just a duck pond.
No, it's all gone. But
all gone.
Leave the poor people alone.
Exactly. Exactly. If you want, as Robin said, if you want to watch him at the same time, and he can still do the voices. By the way, people, if anybody does want to pick up these programs again, he can still do them. Very much so. He's still there, and he's still in his prime as well, and he's still got his pen and paper, and he's willing to write more. We would love that.
Ready to go, Sean.
Absolutely. Do you ever see a program like Tots TV or Rosie and Jim ever coming back in the way that it should be? Because I know that now it's acquired by another company. I know they've tried to bring it up to date in animation form, but it just loses the spark and the authenticity that it had back then. Do you ever see it coming back as it originally was?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you can ever go back, Sean. I think you always have to go forward.
Absolutely.
To the next thing. But yeah, I don't know if children are used to such amazingly perfect images and animation these days. I don't know if puppets are quite as exciting to children anymore as they were when I was a kid.
And I think rather than, a lot of people now say it's the actual media and the companies that have changed, and it's because they want to go down the route of, as we said before, animation, and animation is easier to dub in any language you want, and that's why the likes of Bluey and Peppa Pig are all successful at the moment. But and also you need the budget to do it, and I just think a program like Tots TV and Rosie and Jim are gems. Don't fix something that's not broken, just go back and relive the magic.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it does, of course, come down to gatekeepers, and the people that buy the television shows don't necessarily show the things that children would necessarily always want to watch. No. But if the gatekeeper, who's the person that buys the TV shows, decides that puppets are no longer of interest to children, then children won't get that option. So that's kind of also the way it works.
Hopefully one day Tilly Tom and Tiny and Rosie and Jim will come back. Out of all the shows that you've done, we're going to come on to what you're doing now. And if I was in the West Country, I might say drink up thy cider, because you are a cider drinker now, aren't you, Robin?
Well, I don't drink that much, but my nephew
make it.
and I have a cider company in Asheville, North Carolina, in the USA.
Yeah.
And but I have just built an art studio with my wife Kimberly, who's an amazing artist, and so she's going to have one end, and I'm going to have the other. And we're hoping to make videos in the middle. So watch this space. We might be starting to generate new shows very soon.
Oh, lovely! Aimed at what, preschool children again?
We're not entirely sure yet. I guess we're going to find out. We don't really know. We haven't really started. I'm still laying the floor.
Duck's still behind you.
We'll be finished soon, and then we can start filming.
Duck is still behind you.
It might be for your age group.
Duck is still behind you. Yes, yes. People are going, well, you've wrote many episodes and you've got a studio. Go into it yourself. Bring them back, the puppets. We'd love to see it. Why not?
Yeah, I did actually a few years ago make some new pop episodes. I mean, new pop Blinks.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how I could just do that with 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
We used to have a studio full of 20 people.
Right.
It's it's fun. It's fun to play with that type of genre. Pop.
Do you have a shrine of, because I know Duck's there with you, do you have a shrine of memorabilia or stuff that you've collected over the years from the shows you've done?
I do, but it's scattered all over the place.
Right.
But that's why I'm looking forward to getting my studio set up.
Yeah.
Because I'll be able to have everything.
Who owns the original puppets of Rosie and Jim now?
I don't know, actually. I believe they went off to Canada, but I don't know for sure.
Right.
Like Mr. Blobby, I suspect they're a little sweaty and smelly, but...
Yeah, yes.
They were working puppets.
Yeah, exactly, yes, and 80 grand's worth. Probably somewhere sitting there thinking, we're minted. And we weren't even married or divorced. But hey, it's been great talking to you. You have spoken about your, the stuff that you're up to now. We've got to watch this space. Hopefully there'll be some more programs coming our way, as we're used to seeing them. No, I'm not giving anything away there, but hopefully. So like I do with all of my guests, I like to give them a chance to reminisce not just on what they've done, but the programs that they were watching when they were younger. What was a wee Robin Stevens watching when he was a kid?
Blue Peter was very big in my life.
Right.
I particularly liked what was that one presenter called? Anyway, Blue Peter was very big, and we'd watch Jack and Ori and Play School, your favourite show.
Yes, my favourite show.
There was Wacky Races when I got home from school, and my goodness, what else was I watching? But my mum didn't really like us watching ITV. Right. She liked us to watch BBC, so we were only allowed to watch those shows, I think, when we got home from school.
Well, what was wrong with ITV?
I went went to a funny school called a Rudolf Steiner school, and they didn't really encourage watching TV, which is slightly ironic since I climbed inside the machine when I was old. But for quite a lot of my life, I actually didn't watch TV. They put it, they hid it in my room in the blanket cupboard.
Yeah. So
I found it there one day.
I see.
One of the whole boxes. But yeah, certainly Blue Peter, I think, was the one that stands out for me.
Has the opposite effect now, I guess, because when you see kids and parents, you're like, no, actually, I quite like you to watch TV because I'm actually in it now. It's like back in the 90s, like, please watch it, please, because it's paying my money, it's paying my salary.
Yeah, it's kind of extraordinary that that I should have climbed into this inside the machine. I wasn't allowed to watch it as a child.
Yeah, yeah. Were your did your parents ever get to see some of the later stuff that you did?
Certainly, yeah. My mum, my parents were actually. My dad was a lawyer, and but they were very supportive of me going into this mad profession, becoming a puppeteer. My mum found all the addresses for the puppet companies for me to write to, and then my dad paid me to go and just hang around the puppet theatre for a year until I got a job there. So yeah, they were very supportive of me doing that.
Oh, that's wonderful to see. And now you're living in American North Carolina?
North Carolina, yeah, the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina.
Absolutely. So how long have you been living in America for? What was the reason for you going in the first place?
Well, I left in 2006.
Oh, right.
I've been living then. And just my family, some of my family were from here, and so they wanted to be back where they came from, so I came to join them. And yeah, I miss England, but I like it here too.
I should imagine you do, yeah.
Asheville's
Well, we miss you here as well. We miss you on our screens. And 2006, you say you moved it right when you were still very active in working with Ragdoll still.
Yeah, I was just finishing work on in the night garden.
Ah, okay.
I was helping with the puppetry on in the night garden. The little characters, the Pontypines. Okay. And the people live next door. But I was working on that just before I left.
Right. Okay. Yeah, brilliant. It's been wonderful again, as I said, chatting to you. A long time coming. We did try this last year, and for reasons beyond our control, it didn't work. And now we're doing it again, and it's a treat, not just for me, but I know my listeners and your listeners. Now, we're coming towards the end of the show, and I ask my guest what they would like to be played out when this goes out. You'll have the opportunity to hear a theme tune. It doesn't have to be one that you have worked on, although you can be pompous and say, I would like to hear something I've worked on. But I advise that you choose something nostalgic from your childhood that you would love to hear us play out.
Yeah. I think I would like the Jackanory theme.
Jackanory theme. Jackanory, tell us a story. And you've told us many of those in today's podcast. I used to watch that when I got home from school. When you would eat those little rice crispy chocolate, crackers, cookies, whatever. There we go. Wonderful. Well, from here in London all the way over to you, it's now time for my bedtime, and it's time for you to go and eat your supper, I should imagine.
Very nice to talk to you.
Absolutely.
A great podcast.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to ask, like I ask all my guests, and some of them struggle a little bit with this, but you seem to be able to do this very, very easily. Now, if you had the chance to choose between Tom and Jim, who would it be?
Rosie and Jim. Rosie and Jim.
I think I would choose Jim. Yeah, Rosie and Jim was very happy moments for me for 11 years with a wonderful team. The team was the thing that made it the most fun.
I'm just going to say sorry to Tots TV here.
Oh yeah, sorry about that, Tots TV.
Yeah, sorry Tom. Sorry, Tom. He can still do you, but he just prefers to do Jim. Oh, that sounds very wrong. I won't say that.
It's like asking you. It's like making you choose between your children.
Absolutely. From programs you've worked on and wrote. Absolutely. So you've chosen Jim, and you can do Jim very well. Would you do the honours in signing us out by telling my listeners and your listeners why they should tune in to this podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jim from Rosie and Jim, and I would like you to turn on your little buttons, watch the Sean Patrick Evans show, because it's really, really nice. It's going to be really, really good, and it's going to have me in it. Excuse me.
Oh.
Don't watch the that show. Watch me, because I'm Tom on the Tots TV show, and we're 30 years old, and so is Tilly and Tyler.
There we go. Thanks very much, Robin. You've been amazing to chat to. Again, as I say in all the podcasts, that's one of my heroes ticked off the list, and you certainly were one of them. An absolute national treasure across the board, and long may your success in everything you do. Don't get too drunk on the old cider. Keep making them, and maybe send a bottle my way. I would love to try a tipple of your cider.
We have 14 different types of ciders, but
Is the cider king?
the favourite one that we make is a tart cherry cider called the Village Tart.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Robin. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you
Pleasure
very
to meet
much.
you.
Absolute
Yeah.
pleasure.